This topic is going to be very interesting. We are going to be talking about 5 films that were adapted from books. Yeah, so they can be short stories or novels. They were basically written by an author and they were adapted into films. So, we will start with my most favorite book of all times, which is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. This book needs no introduction whatsoever. It's such a cult favorite of readers, and the movie it was made into, Gone Girl, it goes by the same name. It is also a massive and huge success and a hit film. It is basically a psychological thriller. It starts with Nick and Amy, and how Amy mysteriously she disappears in the day of her 5th wedding anniversary, and Nick is her husband. So the story revolves around very mysterious things that take place during those years. Also has a lot of flashback scenes, and the way Amy disappears, it just leaves absolutely no clue whatsoever what's going to happen next. Every minute is going to be, you're going to be just so hooked up to your screens. You have to watch it, and I cannot reveal so much more because even if I say something, it might just give you spoilers. So I would prefer not saying that. You should watch the film if you haven't watched it already. I'm sure most of you guys have already watched it. So that was it. It is a classic film and a book, so that is a must watch. Next film we are going to be talking about is a very underrated film, and the film is Raincoat, which is directed by Rituparna Ghosh, and it was adapted from a story called The Gift of Magi, which was written by O. Henry. And my school friends would relate to this because the moment we read this story, it was in our high school, so the moment we read this story, it automatically became a favorite of many of us during school years. So this book actually is it's a very pure love story. You should definitely read the book once. It's a short story, wouldn't require more than 20 minutes of your reading time, and the film is actually very underrated. Present day, you will find it on YouTube. It stars Ajay Devgan and Aishwarya Rai, directed by Rituparna Ghosh, as I said. Films depicts the story of Manoj, which is portrayed by Ajay Devgan, and when he meets his ex-fiancée Neerja, which is portrayed by Aishwarya. Just watch the movie. I won't be giving out too much details because, again, spoilers. But the story written by O. Henry, being the author he is actually, the way he writes the stories is very elegant, and the story actually says about what would be sacrificed for love, and it's a pure classic to read. The film we are going to be talking about is Shutter Islands. Yes, this is a very famous film because it was actually written by Dennis Lehane, and the film stars Leonardo DiCaprio. Like, he's basically a US Marshal who goes into the Shutter Islands to investigate where one of his patients goes missing. So that's just a summary. You just need to watch the film because it's a psychological thriller, and again, you'll just be so hooked up to your screens. So you should definitely watch this because it's a really good book, and the film it was made into. Most of the films, like many of the films that were adapted from books, the film doesn't really do justice to the books. But these are the few films I'm talking about. It absolutely does justice to the books as well. So it's a must watch. So the next film we are going to be talking about is Bird Box. It is actually a novel written by Josh Malerman. I actually read the book at first, and the book was so good. I was a little skeptical to watch it because usually films doesn't do justice to a beautiful book. But the film starred Sandra Bullock, so I thought of giving it a watch, and it was absolutely beautiful. But I would still say the book is better. It is one of those psychological thrillers, and I would say since we're in this pandemic, we could actually relate to this even more. Like, just imagine just stuck at your home and knowing you can't just step out of your home because you would see something which would lead you to take your own life. It's basically a suicidal psychological thriller. The moment the film starts, we already know that something is wrong and something is about to happen. We are always on the verge of something. I think you could relate a little bit more if you have watched the film Train to Busan. It's actually a South Korean, I think it's a South Korean film. I've watched the film. I'm not sure it's North Korean or South Korean. I think it's a South Korean film. So Train to Busan was a film about zombie apocalypse, and it's a must-watch film if you believe something supernatural could ever come. Like, if you're one of those people who believe in vampires or zombie apocalypse or something like this, which would you doesn't necessarily mean you have seen it, but you're not completely against it. You kind of believe it, but you haven't just seen it, right? So if you're one of those persons who are onto these kind of films, you should definitely have a watch. Before moving on to the last film, I think there has to be a few special mentions. I mean, I don't completely think that the films did complete justice to the book, but anyway, I'm just going to mention quickly, which is Last Leaf. You all know it's an adaptation, like the film Lutera is an adaptation from the book of O. Henry's short story, Last Leaf. I don't really think that Lutera did justice to the book because The Last Leaf was written beautifully by O. Henry, but the film is good on its own, but if you just compare it to the book, it doesn't really match up to the level. And apart from that, I think like Shakespeare's plays have been adapted over and over the years into many and many classic films, like be it Othello or Macbeth or Hamlet or Romeo and Juliet. King Henry IV. So last film we are going to be talking about is definitely the most classic of all. It is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, and the film goes by the same name. It has been made again over and over the years, but my most favorite one, it is my most favorite Jane Austen's novels. It also Sense and Sensibility and Emma. By the way, do you guys know that Emma, the Bollywood film Aisha, which stars Sonam Kapoor, of course, is actually an adaptation of Jane Austen's novel Emma, which I did not know. I read the novel Emma, but I happened to never watch the film Aisha. I watched it like a few years back, and then I realized that it was actually an adaptation of Jane Austen's Emma. Talking about Pride and Prejudice, it actually depicts the story of the Bennet family of the Regency era of England, and how Jane Bennet, the eldest sister, wants to get married to this handsome guy and rich guy, Charles Bingley, and how the story is really beautiful. But the main characters are Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy. It also has a lot of other adaptations as well, particularly Elizabeth and Darcy. The title, another movie. The story is beautiful. Everybody should watch it, especially if you want to have a look on the Regency. So it looks like the filmmakers took a lot of inspiration from the novels and the short stories written throughout the years by these phenomenal authors. Do you guys like reading storybooks or novels? I personally enjoy and love reading them all.